Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for coming to the full moon gathering. My name is Jasmine. I'm the network weaver with RAD. Super excited to have the conversation we're going to have today about reimagining the economy. We have some great guest speakers. Some of you may have met at the Economic Summit in San Francisco, and if you haven't, you're in for a treat. Before we start, I'm going to ask Erin to start us in a good way, offer some reflection, a song, whatever she's feeling called to, and then we'll jump right into the good stuff. So, Erin, when you're ready.
Thanks, Jazz. Um, I was just thinking, I don't know if people on this call are familiar with Melanie Goodchild. She's the beautiful Anishinaabe Quay who's done a lot of work with Indigenous systems thinking, and she would always talk about the importance of the holy silence. How often we're so used to filling spaces so much, but just that moment in between, Jazz, that you created of silence is actually sometimes the most powerful moments that we can have together. But she'd always, whenever we'd be on a call with her, she'd be like, "Oh, pay attention to how comfortable we are." And she had a beautiful way of talking about it. But it really reminds me when we come together of how many people we are sitting with us as we come together. How many people are sitting behind us, with us, as we continue to bring our mind forward. Tanse Bojo, Gijagate, Indigenous and Pipanese Dodem. My name is Erin Dixon, and for anyone who I haven't met, I'm a helper or Skabewis with the RAD Network, and some of my role is around the spirit of wise practices. And I get the honor of coming in today just to welcome everyone in a good way. And one of the best ways, especially as we head into winter, is to give thanks. And I just want to give thanks to the efforts that came together to bring us together to the Indigenous Economic Futures Summit, especially the way that elders and knowledge carriers were integrated throughout the whole process, in the opening, throughout our gatherings, in our closing, grounding in the spirit of the land and the efforts of rematriation across the region was really, really powerful. And I just wanted to give thanks for that. Today we actually had another elder, Phil Two-Eagle, who was going to be able to come in and to share, and he sent his regrets to our community. But we also invited him to open, just honoring his gifts. And one thing that came back from the RAD Network is how important having elders' voices integrated in some of those conversations were, in the sense of really balancing our holistic thinking. And I just wanted to give that acknowledgement to all the people that we carry with us, all the knowledge carriers that we are, but we're carried by. I'm calling in from Benesi Okanin Gaming, which is Skeleton Lake here I'm right in between Robinson Huron Treaty and Williams Treaty lands, about 2 hours north of Toronto for those looking at the map. But I was really grateful to grow up here. One thing I felt to share going into the winter, when we talk about the spirit of the teachings that we all carry from the lands that we're calling in from or we're grown out of, is our teachings around Nokomis and the full moon. And I've been able to hear teachings from all directions, really, in the times that I've been brought up in. And one of them is the Anishinaabe Dream Drum is a drum that comes from our region, and it was a responsibility carrying our dreams forward and our visions forward, just like the summit that took place. And inside, we had a lot of teachings at the summit about the importance of star knowledge integrated into our thinking. And inside, because some of the drums, of course, traveled, so inside the Anishinaabe Dream Drum is the sacred weave. And part of belonging to the Bawajigewin Dream Drum Society, part of it is understanding some of the knowledge, and I won't go, it's not my story to tell or teaching, but the dream drum sits next to the water drum in the center of Akikwe. And when we create the dream drum, it's also related to the vision and dream that we came into creation with. And so inside the webbing, you might choose an 8-pointed star, a 13-pointed star for our grandmothers, and you would put in sacred items here that only you know that's related to the vision, and then you cover with two sides based on the dreams that you carry. And then we have just a healing society around the dream drums related to healing. But I just wanted to acknowledge that as we enter, I know we're all in different seasonal places, but as we enter the winter season and the space for great vision, I wanted to honor all the speakers coming in for bringing in that vision and creating that space where people could vision together and really uphold the beauty in the ways in which people upheld the teachings was very, very powerful. And I think in our team at the RAD Network, we're so grateful to bring forward here because we still receive gifts after the gathering from. So I'm just going to share 2 rounds of an Ogichida song. Ogichida Kwe and Ogichida Nene is big-hearted people, or the warrior people, and then we might do a closing as well, just to as our prayer and just to honor the spirit of vision, and when we nurture a healthy, good heart, how we're able to bring in that vision collectively as we continue to nurture the vision together. So miigwech.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Miigwech. Thanks.
Starting a simple way, I know listening to it, I feel a lot less tense and just almost in dreamland, which I think is a good place to have this conversation. So for today, we have 2 great speakers. We have Gwen Bridge and James Rattling Leaf Sr., who helped to put together and organize and really promote the Economics Future Summit. It was a beautiful summit. I'm excited to hear about it. So I'm glad to be here with you folks to experience that. And then we're going to move into talking about the branches and the stars. So we're going to talk about the salmon returns with Donna Morton and Penelise Rose when we go into our breakout. And we're going to talk Economics Future Summit with Gwen Bridge and James Rattling Leaf Sr. So when the 2 of you are ready to take it away, the floor is yours.
We have a few minutes to just provide some recap for you on sort of how this came about and what happened there and at the summit, and then some findings which are in a process, I think, collectively across the network that was built in constant emergence and refinement. And so we'll talk a little bit about those things. So thanks for those of you who were there and those of you who supported this effort. And I know there's many of you here, participants, sponsors, supporters from afar. Thank you all. It was the main takeaway for me was that all the people made it great, right? And we happen to be lucky enough to be able to facilitate this convening and these conversations that emerged along the themes that we first sort of brought to the focus of the conversation, which are indicated here on this slide. And so for about a year, we planned this and pulled it off. It's, as I said, in November, over 300 people came from around the world, Latin America, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the US were primarily represented by Indigenous contingents and others, investor contingents as well. So that was really wonderful to have so much global participation. One of the themes, as I mentioned, I think, as we distill some of these takeaways, and we'll talk about products that emerge from that in a moment, one of the themes also was that, yes, this networking is really important, but the facilitation of global Indigenous trade economies rebuilds is really important. So to have this global network really get on board with the idea that we need to do this together and really focus on trade and economic opportunities between us across the world was really an interesting theme. So we wanted to really draw forward, I think, some of the work that's happening in space. And so we conceived of this tree idea, if you will, right? So what we wanted to do is really make sure that we were supporting people where they're at in a way that people are all different kinds of places in terms of Indigenous economy build out. There's many who are interested in advancing robustly sort of the existing mechanisms, whether they're carbon credits or perhaps biodiversity, which is a bit emergent, but some green tech, some conservation financing, projects for finance permanence, these sorts of things are all really important substrate, if you will, that we're nourishing this growth of this Indigenous economies based on those things which form this existing substrate. So we really wanted to make sure that those kinds of concepts were shared, were made available to others who are interested in those kinds of things. And so this is sort of the current finance mechanisms, what's in the substrate already that we can really avail ourselves of. And so following that, we thought, okay, well, this exists, but we know across our various different Indigenous ideas and conceptualizations of what needs to happen, that we need to sort of think through how we take ownership, Indigenous lead, co-develop, conceptualize, and evolve these options, I suppose, into new ideas, right? And so in this middle track, it was elevating current solutions. So it's really thinking about, for me, this was really epitomized, I suppose, by this idea that, yes, there's all these projects, and Indigenous nations are sort of the project recipients or the project initiators, these on-the-ground projects, which are wonderful and great, this substrate. But then, part of it is this, what are we brokering? Like, how do we take ownership over some of the brokering? So this is like Phil's ideas around banks and brokerages, insurance. I see Kim is here too, and sort of thinking through and new standards for corporate accountability, all this kind of stuff. So that was really like, how do we, as Indigenous nations, really begin to play in that space as well, which is, I think, somewhere where, for me, this sort of whole financial market, finance pro kind of stuff, whatever, is really has been a little bit opaque. So part of our goal was to sort of say, okay, well, how do we really understand what our opportunities are in there and begin to push some of the agenda about building on some of those sort of market creation and market facilitation components. And so Sam returns also here thinking about sort of building new markets and that kind of stuff. So that was really the focus there. And then thinking beyond that was really, in a way, I suppose, the short kind of way to sum this up is that we know the Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services and their Transformative Change Assessment, which came out, and Darcy was involved with that. At the end of last year, I think, really talking about the need for systemic reform across economic and governance systems. And so we know that globally, many people are looking to Indigenous nations to provide some directive about how that should look, because Indigenous peoples do stewardship better, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to say, well, if this conversation and this quest to learn is on within the global agenda in terms of global economic transformation, what do we need to bring forward from the Indigenous perspectives about what that new trajectory or new vision point is, and so we can shift along our work towards this new trajectory of Indigenous informed global economic systems. So we had sort of across the spectrum from things that are really on the ground and right now we can do to let's orient that towards this future vision. And so as we contemplate what emerged from that, we'll be doing some findings and some products along the 4 pathways to action, which included these ones, as well as leadership and education and leadership and capacity. And James can talk about that, because in order to do this, again, one of the reasons why this is like, well, my sort of think, well, I need to know this stuff so I can advise my clients or, develop ideas. And so therefore many others must also be in the same position. So let's share amongst each other. And part of that is really focusing on the leadership and the capacity to be able to inform and influence and drive these conversations. So that's another pathway to theme action that we'll have a sort of report out on. So across these 4 pathways to action, sort of backbone of Indigenous economies, the capacity and leadership, the future economic visions, and sort of the current finance opportunities. We'll have products that are emerging over the next hopefully 2 to 3 months that will sort of summate some of the conclusions and findings there so that we can all use them to learn, collectively share what was learned, and then help guide our work in the future. So I think I'll wrap up with some conclusions around the takeaways of the networking and building Indigenous economies and supporting each other across that, conceptualizing models which are grounded in Indigenous thinking and supporting those and building those out collectively. And then the question on everyone's mind is, well, what next, right? What happens next? How do we continue this momentum? And so we're certainly thinking about what those next steps are. This being the first event was good. We had a lot of excitement around the continuing support of these conversations and the ability for this particular concept of Indigenous economic futures to be continued. So we're definitely thinking about those things. So I think I'll stop there and turn it over to James. Thank you.
Good morning. I greet you today from my heart with a handshake, and also want to extend my appreciation and we say Wopila, or thank you in the Lakota tradition to the RAD Network for their financial support and also their spiritual and just this good organization coming with us to San Francisco to be a part of something that we thought was a good thing. We've been getting really interesting feedback from people across the landscape who attended EFS, and even those who did not attend but heard about it. And one of the things that we promoted was this sort of Indigenous-led planning, leadership, and implementation of the agenda, but also the building of the partnerships for support, and also what's that look like, going forward. We always had this model, point A to point B, in this upward trajectory, point A to point B, and in our work, we felt that being at point A, it just sort of wasn't an untenable place to be for Indigenous people when it comes to economics. And so we thought that it was important for us to aim to look at the future in an upward way, upward trajectory. So what would that future look like? That's why we had this term futures in our title. It was a summit that we intentionally use the word summit because we wanted to bring the kind of people who were influencers, who were leaders, who were practitioners, who were community-minded, who worked from the private sector, native and non-native, together in the same place, maybe for a common purpose. What does the future look like for Indigenous people? And even to be as bold as thinking globally, beyond just our local communities. The first thing I would say is we have tremendous leadership from both Indigenous and non-Indigenous that came and shared their program and projects. And I do appreciate leadership. I always like to say leadership matters, and that leaders lead. That's what they do. And we wanted to bring leaders together to have those conversations, to sustain the relationship, but also what new can become from that. I think the second point for me is that it's important to lead and to ground our work in our cultures. That's what makes us different than SOCAP or some of these other economic kind of things, right? I heard from people there that I knew for many years, and people that I met knew that the importance of leading with our culture, leading with our spirituality, leading with our knowledge, and leading with our wisdom. You cannot do that without people. And also representing the diversity of our tribal nations coming together to do the things that they do was very powerful. I think the third part is that there is tremendous work happening in the Indigenous world. I just don't know about it. I don't know enough about it because I don't know. But I think the summit highlighted the need for a global platform of networking and efforts like that to connect us, but also to create exchanges and places of opportunity. One of the highlights for me and also was having Tyson Yukaporta there in person with us and to sit with us and to just share his ideas about everything that he's working on, his ideas now and also in the future. And how do we link together with people like Tyson and others who have been doing this work for a long time? And I think the part of that I think that we do is to honor our leaders like that, like Tyson and others, and to use and practice our traditions that do that honoring to sustain our cultures going forward, and to know that we can work with these concepts of economics and also our traditional ways of understanding and knowing. One of the things that I espoused in agenda planning was the role of leadership and capacity development. For me, I don't have an economic development background, or I never went to school for economics, but clearly I recognize there's a lot of things I don't know that I need to know. And then I thought about myself, but I also thought my own close network, and then I thought beyond that, recognize that there's a need for a learning pathway for people, for Indigenous people to understand, to build a literacy, to build a knowledge, and to build a confidence and self-efficacy to carry this work forward. What does the next generation look like in terms of Indigenous leadership? We're grounded in these Indigenous economic concepts. We're grounded in things that are important to our people. And then what's that look like in terms of spanning those boundaries of disciplines from the Western science to the traditional knowledge? I saw that. And for instance, like people like Keone Lee from Hawaii, when he gave his great talk about the work they're doing, very powerful, and then inspired me. So I think for me, as I wrap up my initial thoughts here, it's really again the role of all of us. I think that, how do we break down those barriers that keep us from collaborating in more effective ways? How do we build story? I mean, if you that were there, it was very powerful to use story, Indigenous story, as a way to ground our law, our policy, our culture, and our education in a very unique way. And that was something that I've never really seen before, been part of, is deeply led by the practitioners who do that work from the RELAW program and things like that. Those are tremendous things when we talk about how we understand each other so that we can do things in a better way. Also, I would say that it's important, that this is grounded in this vision, right? So I mentioned this point A to point B. Point B is where we're aiming at. So what are we aiming at, in my view? Well, I do think that there's a tremendous need for these kind of gatherings. Number one, I think we got to get to know each other. We got to build relations. We got to reaffirm our kinship, and we got to understand each other in terms of ways that are really important. I think that we need these actions, and so not only understanding what other people are doing in this area, but also what are new things that we need to do, what are emerging opportunities that we need to do going forward. And finally, I think that it's this intergenerational knowledge transfer that I care about a lot. As an older person now, I have grandchildren, and I think about our grandchildren today. I think about your grandchildren, our grandchildren. What's their future look like in terms of these opportunities? So let's, as a Lakota proverb would say, let us put our minds together to see what we can do that's good for our children. So Wopila Tonka Chichapalo. Thank you all very much. Back to you.
I just have one thing that I'll say before I turn it back to Jazz. Thank you. We'd be remiss not to acknowledge and honor our colleague Heather Tallis, who was with us on this journey. So this, I think, exemplifies this idea of Indigenous-led, co-developed, right? And so Heather was instrumental. And for those of you who don't know Heather, she was under Biden an architect of the National Nature Assessment in the U.S., which of course is the first stage in developing the natural capital asset accounting, which she was really moving towards before the change administration. And so the National Nature Assessment is the inventory of the nature that you would use in the natural capital accounting. So she's come along with us, but this was this Indigenous led, but also the exemplifies this co-development because she was instrumental in making this happen. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
And thank you, James and Gwen, for providing us with a little bit more understanding as to why you organized it, how it went, how it was feeling when you were there. I know even from my position, I've been hearing a lot of great things, both from the RAD operations team, but then also, as Kim had mentioned, just the community in general. It seemed like it was a very, like it was just a very well organized time, and also just a time to reconnect and build those relationships so the work can keep moving forward. So thank you so much for speaking to that today. We're going to move on now to the next portion of our presentation, or the gathering, I should say, and we're going to talk a little bit about the salmon returns with Donna and Penelise. So with that, I'm going to pass it on.
Thank you. I feel grateful to be here. And the event was incredible. I want to start there. um, I'm calling today from the traditional territory of the Sinemook people, and I'm originally from Ontario, and my family is Anishinaabe and many different Northern European peoples. But I've lived on Coast Salish territory for over 30 years. And the event was for me, I'm someone, this is my 40th year as a change agent. I spent 30 years in the nonprofit and social entrepreneur space, and then decided everything I love is being devastated by finance. The money system doesn't know how to value or love the things that I've loved all my life. And so I went to work on Wall Street and learned as much as I could about the money system. And then I've spent about the last 15 years trying to build more radicalized expressions of finance that actually serve the future and honor ancestors. And this was the first of many conferences that I've been to. I don't even know how many conferences I've been to in my life, but truckloads of them. And I've spent time in the social finance, the ethical finance, the conscious finance, the nature-based finance spaces. And this was the first event where I felt like I was home. I felt like I was with my people. I felt like all of the practitioners were Indigenous led, Indigenous worldview informed, and that our work wasn't some shiny showcase of otherness tacked on to a bunch of normalcy in the House of Finance, where everyone was doing a slightly better version of finance, but then we were the showy thing that was deep. I felt like I was swimming in the waters of my people with my brothers and sisters, and that was remarkable. I feel like there is a deep, deep soul to this work that the idea for me is that finance is the mother of all human systems. There's nothing bigger, faster, more powerful, or more global. And either people like us enter into that space with our hearts and our values and our ancestors thinking about the children and remake the money system, or the money system is going to eat everything and everyone that we love. And so this was one of those rare moments where I felt home. And so I'm very grateful to RAD and the organizers for building such a powerful event. And from the Salmon Returns lens, we decided about 18 months ago to build an expression of finance that was grounded in following the salmon, learning from the water, listening to Indigenous leadership, and actually being informed by the bodies of women in the design of finance. And there's something about, we decided, in essence, to launch through the summit, which felt so right in hindsight, but we only had the money to support one event. We only had the ability to kind of come out into the world one time. And I feel like we chose so well. We had pressure to do SOCAP. We had pressure to do a lot of different events. And I feel like this was absolutely the most beautiful place we could have chosen to kind of come out to community through. And we hosted a dinner where we honored the women that had inspired us through rematriating finance. And that felt really powerful to have 50 matriarchs in a room, badass women that had been doing the remarkable work to rematriate land and culture and money and governance. And our first kind of concrete offering, and I'll post something at the end that gives you more details, but we're building something called a salmon biocultural credit. And there's two ways to think about it. One, it's a mechanism that will pay guardians, stewards, and defenders of the fish. In its simplest form, that's what we're doing. We're figuring out a financial mechanism that honors all of the people that are doing incredible work to bring the salmon home. Like the organization bringing the salmon home in the Okanagan, which is a three-nation, the Tanaha, the Silk Okanagan, and the Shwepmik people working together. And they've successfully brought 750,000 sockeye back to the Upper Columbia, where there was zero. And so we believe those people should get paid for doing the work, that we should no longer be asking our young people, listen to your ancestors, pay close attention to the teachings, live in a cultural way, but earn your money through extraction and taking the world apart. Instead, we have to pay people to be stewards and guardians and do the work of regeneration. And that's what we think a salmon biocultural credit can do. And in many ways, it, I think, releases the carbon credit world from its biggest trappings and problems. Like the carbon credit world is broken, but not the credits. The idea of credits, paying people for doing good things, that's smart. And pricing carbon, that's smart. The problem is the carbon credit market is captured by finance and extractive people that are designing often these things in ways that rely on offsets, rely on secondary markets, and often kind of gamed and opaque ways of what gets valued. And we believe that these credits can be designed with Indigenous communities as the co-creators that design what the practices are, that set the standards, that do the monitoring, that report back, and that receive the money for doing all of the beautiful work that they're doing. And that's the quick version of what we're doing. But in many ways, our work is about making the beautiful work of Indigenous and regenerative communities legible or understandable to people that have a lot of money, but then not allowing the money to set the terms, not allow the money to actually warp the projects, to follow the interests of the money and kind of extractive practices, but instead having Indigenous people and their worldviews at the center of design. And I just want to thank you for your time and attention and this incredibly beautiful work that this team and RAD are doing. And I'll pass it to my incredible co-partner, Penelise.
Yeah. Thank you, Donna. I mean, Donna named all the things. Donna landed that. Thank you so much, sis. I feel really joyous to have come home into the Salmon Returns work and the Salmon Returns community. And this conference was incredibly powerful for me. I come from a background of doing my mom's Anishinaabe and Wyandot. My dad is Scottish and Dutch. I was raised in salmon country. So I was raised on a small Yurok rancheria. Thought I was from the Yurok tribe until I was about 10 and started looking at my paperwork, but raised very much within that culture and as a part of that community. So it's been a beautiful thing to be able to come home to salmon and people through this work. To be able to come home to this conference was incredible. So, you know, I've been involved in my academic background is in was a result of wanting to see our people's spiritual responsibilities to our homelands again become the center of all of our decision making, and our development and our future building. I was raised in the success in both worlds generation, where what we were taught when we were young was that we can turn in this direction and we can be good Indigenous community members, and we can be, bring back our languages, and we can be good for our cultures over here. And then we can also pivot over to I'm from the US, from the colonial US. We can pivot over here and be a good American capitalist, and we can be successful in both worlds. I got into physics science at a very young age. And the thing that drew me into physics was recognizing my tribe's creation story and ways of being and thinking in physics, and as a 14-year-old. And that utterly fascinated me and took me on an entire sort of intellectual, spiritual journey through environmental science and physics. And then in order to really heal what I saw as a young person, how are we going to be sovereign peoples if we're depending on our colonizers for our food, energy, housing, water, it drew me into engineering. Then it was fascinating, as I was working through my engineering work, to recognize that best practices in architecture, best practices in engineering, and now we have social ecological resilience science. The conclusions of of resilience science align precisely with our people's teachings, precisely. And so my role, both through long track of doing very hands-on community-based design of, I would call it, spiritually based infrastructure design, leading into economic planning and mapping, really working with our people to share that, to re-emerge our responsibilities. Yes, our knowledge, yes, our values, and our responsibilities to hold those things at the center of all of our work, to hold that to hold our values, knowledge, and responsibilities to our land and to each other as the center of our economic decisions, at the center of our economic infrastructural decision making. It is key. Like, no matter what has happened to us and no matter how we've been disrupted, it is remarkable what we remember, how we remember what it means to live in relationship, even if it is really hard, even if our communities are disrupted still. We remember what those things feel like. And so to be able to, and the economic conferences I've been to over the past 20 something years, they've all been, like Donna said, run by the proponents of exploitation and exploitive capitalism. So to be able to arrive to this space in camaraderie, with other dreamers, thinkers, and actors who come from a very similar heart, was really just incredible place to be. And so I'm still feeling fed and nurtured and inspired. I'm still reaching out to people that I met there to just thought partner for future building together. So thank you so much all for this work and for this offering, and for doing, all of you here that have arrived today, for doing the work that I may not know about, that you are carrying forward in your own communities. So thanks. I'm glad to be in this circle.
Nice. Well, thank you, Donna and Penelise, for the work that you do. First of all, it's integral work and we love hearing about it. So thank you for doing the work, and also for being here today to share all that good information back with us. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Some of you folks are returning, which is always great to see. And for everybody who is coming here for the first time, I hope to see you next time. We encourage you all to keep in touch with us, whether that's the newsletter or social media, or honestly, even emailing us just to tell us about all the cool stuff you're working on. We encourage it all. And until next time, everybody stay safe, enjoy the winter break, get cozy, and spend it with family and friends.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Jazz, maybe in the sense of the spirit of gratitude, just for all of the work. Sometimes when you come together in a short period, it almost feels like not enough time to express gratitude. I think that's why we had our ceremonies, our giveaways, because it allowed for that natural reciprocity to flow. So just acknowledging, Gwen, you're still here. Just again, Thanksgivings to you and Donna and Penelise, and everyone who came in to share their knowledge with our community. And I know that it will continue to be shared. So really grateful. Yeah.